This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It is 10:08 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and you're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Lobb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And I am realizing that I left my phone in my car.
Oh, I can run and get it if you want.
You know what? Okay, the keys are over there, unless I've left it on that chair. It's one of those days. It's in the front seat, between the seats, most likely.
Front seat. Okay. Cliff's going to go out and break into your car.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine.
Oh, my.
Because it would get a little toasty in this warm summer.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny. I've got my glass case that is in the car a lot, even if I'm wearing them. But the case is there, and it's starting to melt. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. You're thumbing through what looks like a completed book.
I am. It's an absolute real book. So for those who haven't seen it, here it is. Hope, Strength, and Healing for the Wounded Soul.
Cool.
And it is an actual book, and it's kind of thrilling. It's according to the book, it's printed in Orlando. They've got printing presses all over the country.
Cool.
So you're going to get a local one, which is kind of cool. But this is the perfect segue, because I love segues. And one of the things that's in here on page 41 is climate trauma as a kind of special trauma. There he is. He rescued my phone. Oh, you're an angel.
Aha!
The world is filled with angels. Thank you so much.
Well, he's a pretty large one, though.
You know what? We are each other's angels. We really are. And that's important.
Sure.
That is very important.
I love the color.
The color. Oh, the book?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have to ask you, our lovely state government.
Yes.
Is it advanced placement psych or whatever?
Yeah, it's advanced placement psych they want to take out because they don't want our children to learn the realities of sexuality, which is interesting because one of the requirements for Florida licensure is a course in human sexuality.
Naturally.
It's actually one that I have to take as an elective because it's not part of the KCREP requirement, which is the governing body that governs education.
Oh, I was going to ask you. What is that?
It's not a required one, and Florida requires a course in addiction, which is in the curriculum, and this course on human sexuality. Yeah, and I've had other courses in it. I actually even had one in sexuality concerns in catastrophe and trauma. So that's part of my specialty. And I find that very, very sad. And I was actually thinking about that, not only listening to the news as I came through the day, but also just thinking about the reality of knowing the truth. If knowing the truth threatens somebody, there's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because we will be healthier when we can deal with the truth compassionately, lovingly. I mean, I start with a very basic premise, which is that God does not make junk.
Mm-hmm.
If God made humans, which I believe God did, then humans are basically pretty good things. They're not junk. They're not throwaway. They're not cast off. They're not here to, I guess I'm kind of Kantian. They're not here to be tools for other humans. And we just need to live life with that kind of way of honoring God. If God created it, then you need to respect it because it's God's creation.
I worked for a few junkie individuals.
And that's not to say that there aren't people, all of us can be better than we are.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Right. And that's another one of my personal I guess, core beliefs, which is that as long as you're breathing, keep working.
Mm-hmm.
God's not done with you. And,
Well, and
you shouldn't be done with you.
And as much as I joke about retirement and stuff at my senile age,
the new 30, yeah.
You keep hearing. I was talking to an engineer who's about 8 years older than I am, and he's still going, and he's still going strong, and he was telling me about 3 guys that we knew who retired.
Yeah.
Were dead 2 weeks later.
Wow.
It's like they literally turned off. They had been active their whole lives, and all of a sudden, bang.
Of course, the other thing I wonder about that, so this is coming out of my days of being a chaplain in a hospital. On Christmas, there are more heart attacks than any other time of the year.
What?
Because people put off the little pains and they don't go to the doctor. Because the holidays are coming and they don't want to interfere with anybody's plans.
Yeah.
And da-da-da-da. And so these little things snowball into something big.
No, I get that. I get that. I do get that.
Right, so that's part of the package as well.
Wow.
And something that so I don't know if that's playing in. So if these 3 gentlemen, I'm assuming they're gentlemen, that you're talking about, if they were ignoring signs from their bodies that were telling them, go to the doctor, go to the doctor, go to the doctor, and they kept saying, oh, no, it's just the stress of retiring. It's just the stress of retiring. And boom, it wasn't.
Wow.
They didn't get one of those round two-its.
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting there dreaming about all these cruises and stuff. Yeah.
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 And perhaps worrying about finances if they didn't quite save as much as they thought they would need and
wait a minute, let me write that word down.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Save. Yes,
it's important.
My generation was horrible.
Most generations are. Most people are only about $250 away from bankruptcy.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's scary how close people tread that line, and that's a whole different dynamic and situation is human relationships with money. They're seldom healthy.
Well, I thought of you when I heard about that psychology course. And Tom Sullivan is famous in the afternoon for saying this world is being governed by C students or less. And I'm thinking, oh, God, come on.
There's some truth to that. Very few people, and in the Treasure Coast, it's extremely low, the number of people who've gone to college. It's a very low number, and I'm talking about any college. And to me, that's just, it blows my mind, especially now that we've got dual enroll. And there's both a plus and a minus to dual enroll, candidly, which is that the children are really not ready for some of the concepts of college. They're not ready to challenge things. We're seeing a generation of what I would call delayed maturity. And part of that's the way that we're treating them now in high schools. They're not, in the way their parents are. If you've got helicopter parents, they're actually handicapping their children.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
They are not teaching the child resilience. They're not teaching the child confidence. They're not teaching problem solving. They're not teaching openness. Those are really key concepts and fundamentals that young people, that adolescents need. They absolutely need that. And if they don't have it, it's going to interfere with the development of their brains.
I got to ask you, this would be an I or a C question. More women than men?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, more and more women are going into college. And part of that has to do with...
Which is good.
It's not so much that women are going into previously male-dominated fields as much, although that is happening, as much as it is that guys, when they're young, can parlay the strong bodies into money. And so that's attractive. And so we see more young males going into the hand trades, the body trades.
Okay.
And fewer women doing that because they can go to college and get a good desk job or a good inside job. It's where the economy is right now. There's a dire need if you want to be independent, which kids still want to, even though there's a phenomena going on called failed to launch or boomerang, which has to do with the co-residence of adult children with their parents.
Kids coming back home. Yeah.
Kids never leaving or kids coming back home.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not a failure. That it's wrong to look at it negatively, but it's a fact of the economy. If one person making a decent income, not a fantastic income, but a decent income, could qualify for rent and handle it and manage it, then we would see a lot more kids launch and stay launched. And it's kind of ironic. I've been helping somebody look for an apartment for months now, and I know some other people that are looking for it. And this need of having to have a whole lot more money than these exorbitant rents that are being charged on the Treasure Coast right now. And they are off the charts high. There's no question. They're off the charts high. And if you're going to have to pay, let's just take a number out of the air. If you're going to have to pay $2,000 for a small apartment, that means you've got to have $60,000 plus in income. That's, candidly, ridiculous.
Our son bought his place, so I want to say 15 years ago, something like that. But his building now requires, and this is for a small one / studio, really, is what it is. $100,000 a year job.
Yeah, I believe it.
This is in Los Angeles. And you think,
in LA, you're
who
more
has an entry-level $100,000 a year job?
In LA, possibly more, because you have to in order to survive. So LA and New York have inflated the income looks good on paper when you're first offered the job until you go and try to price what it's actually going to cost to live there. And so then you end up commuting, and then it creates a whole bunch of different issues. And I look at that, and it used to be that Port St. Lucie is where you came from West Palm and Palm Beach, and you would live here and work down there. But now our rents are starting to match. And that's scary because we're not equipped to provide the incomes that go along with that.
Yeah, I think when the research facilities really start hiring a lot of people, that is going to make a big difference because those salaries are actually pretty good salaries. But, you just think, wow, it's crazy how they view, in they being, large companies who are looking at moving here, view the Treasure Coast education, or in the case, lack of opportunities in these research companies.
It is. We missed the window for attracting some of that, and part of it, you're right. It's the school system, which needs to get better. Clearly needs to get better. And the irony of it is that we have one of the lowest rated public schools and one of the highest rated colleges in the country. That's
true.
Yeah. And it's one of the things that I tell people who tell me they've got kids when they're considering moving into the area, is that means that you'll be able to send your kids to IRSC and it dual enroll, and that's a tremendous program. No argument. That's a great.
Oh, it is.
That's a great program.
And it's interesting. I'm a young Floridian judge, and Bill May at the city of Port St. Lucie and I have done it for over 25 years. And the people that we've had in, say, even going back almost 7 or 8 years, I would say 85% are dual enrolled.
Yeah. Of those who go to college.
Oh, yeah. They're all planning good colleges.
And, okay, so now I'm going to also talk about Kaiser. which is, I think it's wonderful that a community as the size of Port St. Lucie, that you've got Kaiser as a choice, you've got IRSC as a choice. You're not stuck with one school to pick from.
That's right.
And the two colleges/universities are very different. Very, very different. And of course, the Kaiser, I'm going to say university system, for lack of, because there's so many campuses throughout, plus the online piece. And IRSC is global too. Of course, they're only up to a 40-year degree right now. And I know that's a right now. And Kaiser is also growing. It's a nice-sized campus, and it's got land to grow where it is. They can add another set of buildings there.
And their Palm Beach campus is absolutely drop-dead gorgeous.
Oh, it is drop-dead gorgeous. That's flagship, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
And but there are many different ways, and we've got a healthy student body here in Port St. Lucie. Yeah, just under 1,000 students here in Port St. Lucie, so it's pretty huge.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and you've got a choice.
Yeah.
And I think parents need to look at that. What the various schools offer, and then see where your children are best suited.
Right. They both have a nursing program. They both have many different degrees. The biggest difference to me as an instructor, as a professor, is that at IRSC the classes are full semester ones. So you're going to take 4, 5, 6 classes, and you're going to be zipping between classes and trying to get all that done. Whereas at Kaiser, there's a different approach, which is that you take one. If you're a good student, you can take 2 during a 1-month term. And that sounds horribly until you realize, I was talking with a couple students actually yesterday about that exact subject. And the difference is that you do one course intensively. So you're in class for that class 3 times in a week. And you're reading that one textbook or one set of textbooks. And you're immersing yourself in that subject for that month. And so you can really focus on it. It's not like you've got 6 term papers all due in 2 weeks.
Right.
You're only going to have 1 term paper due at the end of the 4 weeks. You're going to have a midterm at 2 weeks and a final at 4. It's very predictable. It's a very predictable structure.
I think the University of California do this.
Different schools.
Something like that.
Yeah. When I did my education PhD, the classes were 8 weeks. And you took fewer of them, but more of them sequentially.
Mm-hmm.
So either way, you've got to take the number of credits. It doesn't matter how you do it. But it allows you to focus down in and only take 2 or 3 courses. And there's a value in that. And when I did my PhD in psychology, they were 12-week courses. So I had more courses overlapping. It's an interesting piece. Now, Liberty, where I'm going for licensure, is also interesting because they do what they call an ABC. Actually, they've got ABCJ of all crazy designations. The A runs the full 14 to 16 weeks, depending on summer is a little bit shorter. It's 14 weeks. But the A courses run the whole semester.
Mm-hmm.
And the A courses are the first 8 weeks, and the B courses are the last 8 weeks. And the J is a 1-week intensive on campus.
Huh, interesting.
So you've got 3 different ways to take, depending on the classes. Not all classes are offered in each of the formats. So, for example, there is one course that I take now that's only offered in the A or J. And since I can't go exactly spend a week over in Virginia, I'm taking the A format of meeting weekly.
Uh-huh. Well, now, how large a presence do they have on the web?
Liberty?
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty big. This is advertised
I see 'em
as
on
an
Facebook all the time.
online program, and the online campus and the campus programs are separated. We don't mingle in the classes now. I'm sure that an on-campus student, a resident student, can take an online course for credit. I'm sure that it can work that way. And if I so wanted to, I could take one on campus. Of course, it'd be one heck of a commute from Port St. Lucie. But so
You'd
it's
just be on the shuttle. That's all.
I'd need a private jet.
Well, that too.
Yeah. And
Yep.
since, as I have said to others this very week, my last name is neither Rockefeller nor Gates.
Hey, wait a minute. You could fly the private jet, for goodness sakes.
No, I'm not rated for a private jet.
Did you ever want to?
I thought about it. It's not easy to break into.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
And yeah, depending on how they treat their pilots, it's very, very different in the corporate world.
Oh, I would imagine that could be really difficult.
Yeah.
Really difficult.
And again, highly competitive. And the odds of a short female being hired are probably not real great. And plus, I love to I love to teach. I love to teach. I've looked at my life, and I don't think that there's any time that I've stayed away from teaching for very long.
Mm-hmm.
I love seeing people learn. I love seeing people become better. And that's part of what gives me my juice.
There you go.
And I guess that's part of the reason for both that's a good segue, for both my and Dr. Strahan, and hopefully she'll be here next week. I'll put that out there in the world. But that's the reason for this book, is so that people can read it.
Show that on television. Oh, yeah.
Hope, strength, and healing for the wounded soul.
A gorgeous, gorgeous cover.
Thank you. And I also love the back cover.
Yeah. That's intriguing.
Yeah.
So who came up with that idea?
You know what? I'm going to give it to where it belongs, Bing.
Okay. Huh.
Bing helped me. I mean, I talked to it, and I told it what I wanted, and it put the pieces together.
Really?
Yeah. So the cover by Bing.
AI. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. I mean, you have to have an idea of what you want. So, right, I specified an androgynous silhouette on a river scene with many color flowers. And this is what it gave me.
Wow.
It actually gave me about 10 of them to pick from.
Uh-huh.
And
so
I
cool.
and Dr. Strahan looked at them all, and this is the one we picked.
I like it.
And, yeah. So we were able to suggest the cover, and that's how it went.
Available where?
It's available on Amazon. It's available both in print and on Kindle, and I believe the audiobook is in process.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. Any way that you
great.
want to have it, because I think Kindle actually has a read function too, but that's an automated voice, and the other one will be a human voice.
Perfect. That's great.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
different ways to do it, and it talks about different things. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, one of the sections in here is on climate trauma, which is a special trauma. And I talk about it for a couple of pages. It starts on page 41. I love tables of contents. There we go. Right, climate trauma is known as eco-anxiety or climate anxiety. That's because of the issues of climate change. Whether you're on the denial side or if you're on the, oh my God, it's going to kill us side. Right, those being the two extremes.
Yeah, and we've been through that in Florida.
Yeah, and well, yeah, my late brother in Michigan, when he'd see me when we would do FaceTime, the first question he would ask me is, "How far is Miami underwater?" Because he had climate anxiety. Definitely, he thought that I was going to be, and I'm like, I am so far from the beach that by the time it gets to me, you're in trouble too.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a huge wave.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I do have to ask you about something very unpleasant. That the sentencing yesterday of the Pittsburgh slayer in the synagogue.
The death penalty.
Death penalty. Horrible incident.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The turn of anybody to using guns in the expression of their violence is just, it's tragic. We have so much unresolved trauma in our society that we're not catching these people and helping them be healthier before they get to the pick up the gun and shoot stage.
Mm-hmm.
And I've not talked to the individual. I don't know enough about the individual to know anything other than that he was convicted of doing XYZ. And I believe he did it. But I'm not on the ground. I do know people who live there. I used to live in Pittsburgh.
I know that's
used to be the
one of your hometowns.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've walked down that street. I've bought Charles chips at one of the stores, and there was a store.
It's a beautiful
sold
city.
Charles chips.
I always loved Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Pittsburgh is a cool city.
Yeah, it is.
And lived there for a good number of years, and yeah, and had my share of traumas in the area. The thing about it is that we're not helping people heal from trauma. We're failing that area so badly. And trauma is not just being there when an airplane goes into a building. It's also watching it on TV. It's also hearing about it. It's hearing the stories of those affected by those shootings. It's one of the classic ones that I talk about, and I think I talked about it last week, was the car accident.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are so many ways to be traumatized in life. And you can tell when somebody's dealing with a trauma because two things. One, their reactions are out of proportion to what's currently going on, and they're somewhere else if you're paying attention. So they're dealing with that unresolved trauma.
I do have to ask you because that killer, you can say that now, it's no longer alleged.
The convicted killer.
Convicted killer. Got the death penalty. Your feelings on the death penalty?
I think that the death penalty, candidly, is horribly expensive. I don't think that it does what we want it to do. And that's a question that I think Americans need to ask. The reality is that killing him is not going to bring those people back.
Exactly.
It's not going to undo the damage. And do the research, folks. It costs 10 to 20 to 100 times more to execute someone than it does to keep them in life imprisonment.
When I was doing my series in California, and of course this is 40 years ago, there had been someone on death row that I interviewed for 28 years at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, he'll probably die on death row without being executed. Yeah. That's the reality of it. Because it's a very long process. It's a court intensive process.
Yes, it is.
There are mandatory appeals because it's such a heinous act on the part of the government. And why do I say that? Well, first of all, we are responsible for a good chunk. We have something like 82% of the world's executions between us, you ready for this list? China, Iran, Iraq.
Ooh, nice folks.
Yeah. You want to look at the list of countries that allow capital punishment, and it's very small, and it's not a list we want to be on.
Wow.
And we spend a ton of money. There's the week, I'm not forgetting the show that John Oliver hosts. That was the week that...
A week that was? Or
yeah, I think
like
that was the week that was. It's a Sunday night recap of the previous, or Saturday night, whenever he runs. I confess, I watch it when I watch it, which isn't often. when I catch
It's a good
snippets of
show.
it. It is. He does some amazing things. His second show ever was on the death penalty. It was right after one of the botched executions.
Oh,
And he talked about that, and he did some research, and he showed that basically to give somebody the death penalty, to execute them, is equivalent to the entire budget of the Star Wars trilogy.
what?
Yeah, it's hugely expensive.
Wow.
And that was in California. He used California data in his...
Well, that's the gas chamber.
it's everything. All the special
yeah.
people, all the special buildings.
Oh, yeah.
There's a ton of stuff that goes into that. And I look at something like Germany, and I've talked about Germany before. And Germany, coming out of the Holocaust, came up with one of the most humane, low recidivism ways of incarcerating people. Totally different. Instead of warehousing people, which is basically what we do in the U.S., we warehouse inmates. Germany has approximately 1/10 the number of inmates that we do, and they have a very, very, very low crime rate because they don't have repeat offenders. People don't want to go back into prison, and their prisons, compared to ours, look like a resort.
I wonder what Canada's like.
Canada does not have the incarceration. We are far and away between 5 and 10 times more than anybody else on the planet.
I'm not surprised.
We have the highest incarceration rate per 1,000 or per 100,000, however you want to measure it, of any country on the planet. And the crime rates between here and Canada are almost identical. And they've have the same upticks and downticks. That is, if you look at Rosen's TEDx talk of his trip where he went with 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes did a tour of German camps, and they went along with a couple of DAs, of which Rosen was one, and a couple of prison officials from their states, and a convicted murderer went with them too. He's a nice group. And they look at the German prisons. They toured them with the idea of, we need to take a look at what are other countries doing, what are best practices. How can we make American prisons safer for the guards, safer for the communities around them, and how can we lower the recidivism rate? Recidivism is the likelihood of an inmate doing a crime. And one of the things that Germany does very differently, there's so many things they do so differently. They're to work in the German prison system is a coveted job. They take about 10% of the applicants. That's how competitive it is. And the first 2 years that you work for them, you are in training. You don't even see. You don't actually go into the prisons and work with inmates. You are being trained, and you're getting a counseling degree. You get a little bit of control so that if something does happen, you know how and what. And they aren't armed walking in and out. It's a more collegiate kind of environment. The inmates have keys to their cells. They all have private cells. And Rosen does a great job of talking about that. He says there's a big difference between two college students sharing a small room and living together and a rapist and a murderer. To be able to go into your own room, to have the key to it, and be able to unwind is so powerful. And that's the difference. Right? That's the big difference between Germany and here, is that they're looking at how to get this person back into society, functional, how to give them the coping tools that they need so that the anger doesn't erupt into violence. They have cooking kitchens on each floor of the prison where the inmates cook. And the American officials asked the German officials, well, doesn't that mean they have to have knives? And they said, of course. How else are you going to cook? So these inmates have what we would consider lethal weapons at the ready. And they don't. The staff is trained at de-escalation at management, and the inmates are required to go for therapy. It's part of their program.
What I loved about the 60 Minutes stories was the fact that they let them out to look for work.
Yeah.
So unlike here,
where you just throw them out the door.
You just got a plastic bag, see ya.
Yeah. And that's the last 6 months of your sentence in Germany. You go to what's considered an open prison. You come at night. But during the day, you're putting in that application for a job, getting a job, going to work. They show one of the murderers, right, he's a convicted murderer, and he's at the last 6 months of his sentence. And he gets a job working on a dock, and he goes every day from prison. And during that 6 months, he finds a place so that when the sentence is over, he's got a place to go live. And instead of scaring...
And a job.
And a job.
Yeah.
Right. And there's the sense there that you've paid your time, you've done your time for the crime, and you've learned skills. And they really do. They teach them, woodworking skill. We're talking about incredible pieces of equipment. They've learned cooking. They've learned baking. They learn painting and crocheting. They learn a ton of things to manage themselves, and they learn to make things that they need. So they're not looking to just either get a handout or steal. If they've got that's part of the reality, is that people are not being trained. And there's some shortcomings clearly in the school system in Germany if people are coming through and not having these skills.
Yeah, wow.
And we know that in America they don't have those skills. So, yeah, there's a lot of room for improvement. Don't get me wrong, I'm an American by choice. I live here by choice. But we can be a whole lot better than we are. And we can learn some things from the way Germany does it. They have an extremely low crime rate. They have an extremely low recidivism. One of the questions that the 60 Minutes group asked them, because they allow, if an inmate is doing their thing, if they're going to their therapy, if they're going to their jobs, if they're doing all the little check boxes, they can earn what we would call a furlough. They can earn a weekend to a few more days off to go be with family somewhere. And the show, actually, the 60 Minutes video, starts with seeing a murderer have ice cream with his sister and niece in a resort town. And, he says, yeah, that's the fairy tale of German prisons. And they asked the prison officials how many of those inmates either don't come back, have to go be found, or commit a crime where they're out on their furlough. And the Germans said 0.3%.
Wow.
0.3% of the thousands that are out every week doing something and out of their... and their prisons are much smaller. Much, much smaller. So there's a much higher staff to inmate ratio. They're not controlling them by mob control. They're controlling them one-on-one. And they're not as much concerned with control as they are just being the presence that's there if and when needed. Much more relaxed, quite pretty. The buildings are not... The parts of the building look like a prison. There's wires around, and there's bars, and there's all of that. But there's not that... Having talked to inmates and gone into the prison system that way, there's not the, leave your phone out in the car and all the stuff that you deal with going through all the checkpoints and the searches to go visit and talk to somebody. It's just, there's not that kind of thing in the German prisons. They're much more open because the inmates have access to these things. In fact, in each room there's a phone, and they've got computers, because how else are you going to look for a job and do some of those things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not that they don't have the Russian gangs and the the various gangs.
Yeah, they're all over the world.
They're all over the world. They are seeing radicalism, that population, and some of that again is a system that needs some real serious overhaul. Is the societies that produce those kinds of individuals, and just need to get better. But yeah, they've got those problems, and they're aware of them. And there's drugs, and there's all the other real life things, but they're not at the level that they are in the American system.
You know, it's funny because I always knew, whether I was at Folsom or San Quentin, that I would get out with my cameraman, but it was to hear those doors slam shut.
Oh yeah,
there's something real final
chunk
in your head.
Yeah,
it's like, oh no.
Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting. They were talking with one of the inmates in his room, and the guy interviewing them says, you've got a table here where you could break off a leg, and the guy says, I never thought of it. Why would I do that? That's the difference. Mm-hmm. They want to get through their time. They want to be released. Are there people who are permanently retained because they are considered too dangerous? Yes, there are. It's not that their prison sentence, because there is no such thing as not up for parole in Germany, and they don't have capital punishment, so nobody's on death row. So everybody knows there's a time of getting out, and I think that's important, to not have that sense of I'll never see the light of day. And yet they talked to one of the people who is on what they call protective constraint or protective custody or something like that, where he doesn't meet the criteria for being released. And so his sentence is over, but he's still in, and he still has a key to his cell. His cell looks quite nice. It's attractive. But he doesn't have freedom. And until he can show that he is able to go back out into society safely, he's not going to. And yet he was not violent or hostile or angry in dealing with the news people. And yeah, he could have been putting on a good act, but my sense is that he wasn't. My sense is that wasn't a...
And you can cut through that better than most.
I hope so. It's not that I can't be fooled. I certainly can, but yeah. Been there, done that a lot of times. Seen a lot of games. And, what can I say? We need to treat each other kindly. It really does come down to that. We need to respect each human being as a human being. We forget that part. And you look at Germany and the Holocaust and what that was, and they wanted to make sure that didn't happen again there. And so in their constitution is a line that says human autonomy and dignity is inviolable. And that's why the prison system is the way it is. We don't have any such thing. We guarantee the right to pursue happiness, but what does that mean? And what is that? But the difference of treating every individual with human dignity is hugely different than what we do. We dehumanize people in many, many systems. We look at them as units rather than as individuals. And that's not to say that everybody in Germany loves the prison system and thinks it's wonderful. They don't. They're a typical society, and there are pros and cons on everything. But their constitution guarantees certain rights. And those are the rights that give the inmates one cell per inmate, that give them basic human needs. And in today's world, yeah, those are real. That doesn't mean you don't put in things that don't allow them to go to porn sites and don't this and don't that. I understand that. That's when you say they have a computer, they don't have access to everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they can go job hunting. They can go this and they can go that. And software is clever enough to do that. It really is. So we can be better. We do not need to warehouse the numbers of people that we incarcerate. But unfortunately, there's too many people making a good chunk of money by warehousing human beings, and they do not consider them as human beings.
We now have private prisons, you bet.
Privatation.
And that's for profit, folks.
Yep. Private for profit, and who's paying for that is the inmates.
Well,
big time.
Well, and so are we as taxpayers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We pay an exorbitant price for people who could be rehabilitated. Now, I don't know if that shooter, if that killer could be. But
that was a pretty horrific act.
It was. There's no question. It was horrific. And I'm not here to get in which one's more horrific. That's if you lost a loved one in any of these acts, it's horrific. I'm thinking of Schwarzkopf when he said 1 mine is all it takes to make a minefield intense.
Yeah. Well, that's so true.
You hit a threshold and it's horrific, period. And it was. And the ripple trauma effect through other congregations is huge. Does that need to be addressed? Oh, yeah. But I'm not sure that the penalty is going to make them whole. I know it's not. I know it's not. That's the piece. That's the bottom line. Are we really going to punish him with the death penalty any more than we would having him think about it for the rest of his natural life? I'm not convinced.
Well, looking at the video of some of the victims' relatives, and they all looked like they were in the state of shock.
Of course they were. And they probably still are. And I'm hoping that some of them are getting some trauma treatment. There's no way that was not traumatic for the families, for anyone who lives in the Squirrel Hill area, for anyone who lives in Pittsburgh. Just that ooh, I could have been part of it, right? Or I was, or any of that. And then there's the people, you've got secondary and tertiary trauma, the people who cared for the victims and their families, and the people who they debrief to. You've got 3 levels that it can go. So there's primary trauma is when you experience or witness an act of violence or catastrophe, something that traumatizes you. The next level is the caregivers who take care of the people who are the victims of trauma. So the first responders, the medical staff, all of those. And then the third level are the people that those people talk to about it.
Well, and there were a bunch in the San Diego shootings saying, I should have been at the temple that night.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there. And now I feel
And now
guilty.
they've got survivor's guilt.
Yes, yes.
Very real. Survivor's guilt is a very real. Why me? What made me not go? And there's a sense in that I'm not worthy of being saved. I haven't done anything. Right? So why? That's part of the why me. And then the other one's the reality of if I had done what I normally do, I could have been one of those statistics. And yeah. That's the hardest, and there is no answer to that question. Why me? Why me is in many ways a form of denial. It's a challenging of the reality of life that's not at a rational level.
Okay.
Because those kinds of things, even though, yes, the perpetrator planned it at whatever level they did or whatever, but who, what, when, who was actually in what scenario, that's random. That's right. Even if somebody was targeted, it's still random, particularly for the bystanders, right? The unintentional consequences, folks. And So there's a randomness to it, and there's a randomness to life. And it is. It just is, folks. It's not, suffering is not meted out to people as a punishment. We need to get out of this punishment mentality and say, okay, that happened to me. It was sad. Now what do I do with it? How do I turn that into something good? That's the resilience piece. How can I take this horrible thing that happened and cope with it, to reconnect with the meaning in my life, to not let it live in my brain? That doesn't mean forget it. And it doesn't mean that you love the individuals involved any less. But you still have an obligation to yourself to live life, and to God for living your life as fully as you can. So take that angst, take that energy, and channel it into something good to give that person's life meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can carry forth, and that's going to help with some of that survivor guilt. If you're taking that energy and doing something with it in their name, that's powerful. And I'm going to flip it. I know I've only got 2 minutes, but I'm going to flip it into an interesting place. That's part of the reason for giving citations when you use somebody's ideas and you learn from them, because otherwise you're stealing that. And isn't using somebody's name to do something good, to move forward, one of the most powerful things we can do in our society?
You bet.
So, yeah, hear the music, folks. We're drawing to a close. My heart goes out to all the folks in the Pittsburgh and any other places where we've had these acts of violence. May you find healing. This is Rabbi Shafir Lobb for Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And we're going to start to talk about High Holy Day Season 2.
And
coming up soon.
Your book.
My book, Hope, Strength, and Healing for the Wounded Soul. Available on Amazon. Just look for Trauma and Loeb, and it should come right up, and you'll see it with its pretty southwestern colors.
All right. World-renowned author, Rabbi Shafir Lobb.
Okay, now I'm thoroughly embarrassed.
Have a good week.
You too. Bye-bye.
This is WPSL, Port St. Lucie.